Welcome to Couch Church, where we take the plastic off of the living room furniture. That's right, we're sitting on Grandmama's couch so we can discuss the issues at the crossroads of Christ and culture.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Couch Church, where we take the plastic off of the living room furniture. That's right, we sitting in Grandmama's living room. We're going to have these hard-hitting discussions to deal with the crossroads of both Christ and culture. We are in March Madness. That's right, March Madness. But we're not talking about basketball today. We're talking about mental health and how mental health matters. Joining me on the couch today is once again Lady Ebony. Hey, Lady Ebony.
Hey, what's going on, Pastor?
I'm doing good. How you doing today?
My mental health feels pretty good today.
Your mental health feels pretty good today.
Good. It's sound today.
It's sound. It is sound. You clothed in your right mind.
In my right mind
in
today.
your right mind. Also joining us on the couch is Minister in Training Crystal and Minister in Training India. How y'all doing today?
Good today.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How y'all feel?
I feel great.
You know, too often we ask how you doing or what you doing, but we may need to say how you feeling.
I'm making it one day at a time today.
How you be, India?
I'm a little excited about this month's topic. I really like mental health and school-based mental health, so that's what Crystal is talking about.
Mm-hmm. Even Siri
like,
she
mental
never showed up for our conversation.
Siri say, I got feelings too.
I did not understand that. What do you mean?
Also joining us on the couch today is Dr. Joanne Frederick. She is a 25-year veteran in the mental health and clinical space. She is an adjunct professor, a clinical counselor, as well as a professional in private practice. How you doing, Dr. J?
I'm doing well. I'm excited and ready to roll.
All right. So you know what we do? We always ground our discussions in a biblical text. And today our biblical text is Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25. It simply says, anxiety in a man's heart weighs it down, but a good word makes it glad. And so we understand that mental health is an incredible, important, yet sometimes overlooked issue, particularly in the African American community, from the tremendous stress that is caused by the intersecting identities of race and class, economics, education, housing, and food, even to a lack of mental health care and resources for the Black community. Mental health support for the Black community needs to be addressed. And so in this discussion today, we're going to be looking at the current state of mental health as it relates to the Black community and lift up some strategies to increase support for mental health services for our people. Here's what I want to start today's conversation off with. Dr. J is the author of Copeology. Copeology, Exploring Coping Techniques, by Dr. Joanne Frederick and friends. I do have a chapter in the book.
Yes.
But let's start off like this. Dr. J, how do you define mental health?
All right. Thank you for that question. And thanks again for all of you all having me here. And hello, everyone. So how do I define mental health? Mental health is a range. It ranges from poor to well. And we all are somewhere in that range. And so if we're looking at poor mental health, that means that when life crises come and stresses come, we're dealing with it in a very negative way, like drinking, smoking, partying, gossiping. That's how we deal with our stress. And a healthy mental health would be doing things like paying attention to our sleep pattern, how we're eating, how we're staying physically active, how we're communicating, how we're asking for help. So mental health, again, is a range.
Which is different than mental illness.
Correct. It is different than mental illness. Yep. If you notice both terminology, illness sounds more negative and health is more positive. So when we look at mental health, there's positive ways to deal with mental illness.
I can recall there was times in my life when how I dealt with my mental health was in a negative way, and I've never heard it explained the way you just did. It has mental illness has like a negative connotation, and mental health is supposed to have a more positive connotation on it. For what I've heard, or sometimes we use those terminologies interchangeably.
Yes.
And they try to make them into one. But I think mental health is important. And then what I was gonna say was I know there was a time in my life where I must have been I wasn't even on the spectrum. For negative mental health, I think I had fallen off.
You mean not on the spectrum? I'm like,
for mental health, I'm talking about mental health,
Mental
right?
health.
Yeah. So it wasn't even gonna be registering. From a 0 to 10, I was like at negative. You know how you go and they say, how's it 30 degrees negative at the Arctic? I mean, what does 30 degrees feel like?
How's
Cold,
that possible?
right? How's that possible? Cold to cold. And I can recall a time in my life where I didn't necessarily know if I was going to get out of issues of depression and anxiety, but the coping skills are so important, and the people you surround yourself with are so important too.
I had a quick question as you were saying that, and you were talking about depression, and we look at mental health versus mental illness. When does the poor mental health become an illness? So when we look at depression or anxiety, because some people are on medicine for prescription drugs for depression, but is that also, like, where does that fall?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm just excited that we're having this candid conversation. People don't get healed or look for help or even know help is available until we start telling our stories. So I appreciate you talking about me, like how it impacts you. And so when we use the word mental illness, so clinically we're using what we call the DSM-5. It's our clinical Bible. Everything is in there.
Clinical Bible.
Yeah, clinical Bible. That's diagnosable. And so your question is, like, when does a mental illness turn into mental health, or like how it relates, I think was the question. And so if we're looking at mental illness, we're looking at one of the diagnoses. So let me say a mental health issue. Let me use that word. And I think everybody have a mental health issue. I do, whether it's in the book or not. It could be anger, rage, again, gossiping, to depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. But there's various ways to treat it. It's all treatable. And I usually say there's only 3 ways to treat it. It's talk therapy, where we are talking about it. It is medication, which you were referring to, because we can take prescribed and monitored medication, and our depression will go away just like that. And the anxiety would minimize itself. So that's just 2 ways. And the third way is both. Sometimes we need talk therapy and we need medication to function normally, whatever that means.
Right, whatever that
Means.
Whatever.
People
What
like
is
the word
normal these days?
Yeah.
How do you define that?
People like the word normal, but what is normal? Like,
See,
that's why I
Dr.
say
J, I saw eyebrows go up when you talked about like addictions, and you were talking about gossiping.
yes.
And I ain't saying nothing. I ain't throwing nothing
Start
out.
gossiping on the couch.
I ain't saying nothing. But I'm surrounded by beautiful.
Don't be like
You about to get in trouble.
I'm about to
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Don't
What
get booted off your own couch.
But what I will notice in the relationships that I'm building with these women on the couch, and even you, Pastor, we don't have a big time for gossiping. Like, when we having our conversations, when we're all separate in our spaces, that's not really something that we do. And I think that's a character flaw that people doesn't recognize can be a mental health issue.
It's
I
an
never
issue.
thought it would.
Oh man,
Yeah, it's an issue. So it's not in the book that I was just talking about, right? But that is a problem. I mean, one theorist that we, study from, Sigmund Freud, you've heard that. And one of his theories was like things that happen in our childhood affects who we are as adults, and oral fixation, and one of those oral fixations is gossiping. I'm just kind of, bringing it to terms of a transition from the book and this European psychologist to what it looks like in our community.
We could put it where the ghost can get in your mouth like water. come on out.
So it is a problem,
it's a
right?
problem.
Would you say gossiping is a problem?
Oh,
For some
definitely.
people, I mean,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, definitely.
all
I've
kinds of
seen it.
problems.
Yeah, and not only is it a problem for the person doing it, it's a problem for the people that they're hurting behind it.
True,
This could be a trigger for
true.
someone
man.
else's.
It is.
People around them.
Oh, yeah,
Even
that has
receiving
hurt.
it. Like,
Yeah,
you
that has
dumping
hurt.
on.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's true. Because sometimes you could be having a positive day, things are going good, and someone brings something to you that messes up your whole way of thinking and being in that moment. And then, so what do you do with that? Do you tell the person, hey, I don't want to hear that right now? Do you change the subject, or do you listen and get involved? You know, off camera, we were talking about creating boundaries.
Yeah.
That's a way when we need to create boundaries that work for you in your space, me in my space.
And some people don't recognize that's what they're doing and how bad it's affecting the people that they're doing it, or they're dumping their souls out and trying to talk about what's going on. But I've seen a very negative impact with me when listening to gossip.
Yes.
And then I've set that boundary and no longer talk to individuals too much that, that gossip, because I don't want that in my spirit.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So let's talk about that individual. What has happened to them? What are they going through?
A lot.
What has not happened? Thus, this is the way they latch out. So it could be something from childhood. It could be any trauma. It could be any hurt that they've experienced.
Yes.
It could be them dealing with stuff and trying to distract from it. And so they'll put that attention on other people by talking about other people or other things.
They're trying to mask some of their own hurt,
Could
or
be.
guilt and shame.
Could be,
by
yes.
pointing out the the areas of concern in somebody else's life.
Exactly. It can also be related to low self-esteem, low self-confidence. So we bring other people down. And again, it could be unconscious. I don't think the person is sitting there like, oh, I'm going to do this today. Maybe, but most likely not.
Yeah, like,
Just
and it's
happens.
interesting. We're talking about gossiping, but I think you can also look at that as it relates to habitual liars,
Yes.
right? Who would tell you a lie like it's the truth,
And believe that
and
lie.
but even when
Yes.
you point out, no, that's not what happened. No, that's a lie. I'm telling you, it's the truth, right? And so that too is this addictive personality.
Narcissistic type.
Okay.
See, now you get into a mental illness. Then you
I
As
would
we
say
have this
so.
conversation now, I've
I
never
would
thought,
say
is it a
so.
mental illness? Is it
Yeah.
mental health?
Oh, so?
What is, and I've never thought about it in the way that you've been saying it.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here like,
Okay, so I'll help you with that. So let's talk about the habitual liar. This person has done this for so long. Again, it could be unconscious, but the people around them, the loved ones, and not maybe some of their foes, you lying,
how
you
you
know.
unconsciously be lying all the time?
Just make up a story. Just make up a story.
I
And
get how you believe it, but
And-
how you just unconsciously be
yes,
lying?
and you can make up a story and believe
And
your
believe
story
it.
to the point that you'll argue with somebody.
So wouldn't we
But
say
then-
that's mental
That is
illness?
narcissistic
Yeah,
behavior.
I would say
going
that
on
would
in
be
their
mental
head.
illness.
It's like playing a visual story in your head.
Yeah.
It's almost like watching a movie. That's what I'm gonna stick to.
Yeah. So what's going on in their head, we're not going to understand it. They know what's going on
They
in their
know,
head, and
though.
it's
They
their
know.
truth and their reality.
I can't
And we
stand
fight
that
and
my
argue.
truth
Yeah.
thing
it's
all the
theirs.
time
It's
sometimes.
their
It's-
truth.
They're true.
Yeah. And this is what happens with the friends and family. We get frustrated with them.
Like now, when we already know
now,
somebody, we don't even
yeah.
know how
Right.
is it there.
But
how
if
is
we
it not true?
empathize
Right.
and we listen, and you kind of like, okay, so here's an example I like to give my students. If I wake up one day and I'm purple with green dots, I want to Google it to see, okay, what the problem is. And then I look up in the sky and it's purple. And I want to tell everybody the sky is purple. Everyone is going to argue with me and say, no, it's not, it's blue. But if you empathize with me or that person and be like, you know what? Yeah, it is purple. Let me hear
Am I
more
not
about it.
participating in your crazy?
Well, you're empathizing. Because it's so crazy. If we want to use that word.
Okay.
We'll
Is that
talk
not?
about that
Is that
word.
not a good?
It's not.
No.
It's not for
If
us.
It's
No.
Not for us. But I'm going to get back to
I'm
it.
gonna sit
Because
back
it
and
But
can
I'm
be
gonna use your
diagnosed.
word.
today.
It's
I'm
so-
Because it
like,
can be
Okay.
diagnosed
All right.
now.
Right.
It's not
You
crazy.
can't-
It's so
you can't call a black
abnormal
folk
Yeah.
crazy.
that we want to
Abnormal.
fight it and
Say
argue and we
abnormal.
want to, as opposed to, okay, you know what? I wonder if everything's okay with this person.
Right.
Okay, yeah, you're right. It's
Let me
purple.
let
Yeah,
you
what else
keep
you
that.
see? And start pulling out.
Yeah, I know y'all don't do that.
But
Yeah.
Dr. Joanne, Dr. Jade, what if it's someone that's around you a lot?
Yes.
Like, I remember just if it's someone that you're around a lot or that's involved in your life.
Yeah.
And I remember we went to a conference at St. Stephen's, and when you got up and spoke, and it was so important, you said that you set boundaries. And set boundaries for your mother, your father, your husband, your wife, and what are the boundaries you would set with just regular people? They're no longer your mother,
Right.
but they're what their name is. They're no longer your father. That's what their name. Oh, I never forgot
You
that.
reading my mind. You heard me say this somewhere?
I remember this.
Really? Okay.
I follow it now.
Yes,
So I think
okay.
it's important that we separate just people from, as well as our family and who we know and our friends, and just make sure we still love on you, but keep in mind this is mental health or mental illness, and you could, step back and still have empathy and make sure you set your boundaries.
Correct.
Yeah.
But what I would also say is even the family members, think about them as their name. So, for example, one of my good friends, her name is Jeanette. But other than Jeanette, her name is Mom. She's my mother. But if you think about people with their names, take the title away, mother, father, cousin, the name, so that now you can empathize a little bit more. Because when we have these titles, we have more expectations. Right? And that's part of my point too. Sometimes we have to lower our expectations. So when I have parents telling me, oh, my 35-year-old son is doing this, I ask them, how old does your 35-year-old son act? And they'll be like, he act like he 18, 19. Okay.
Then meet
Treat him
there.
as such.
Meet him there.
But at some point, can you become an enabler?
Yeah, you
So
can.
I understand empathizing with someone, but if I'm just always like, yeah, I see it, yeah, I got, it almost feels like you are enabling
Okay.
that person. And I've seen that happen, especially like the example of the 35-year-old. I've seen so many times, and we can all say people in our family, and they have allowed this person to just function in this role and be this person because you're trying to be supportive, but instead of being supportive, you're enabling this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And so
I love where you're coming from.
I think acknowledgement is different than acceptance. You can acknowledge a person and whatever the behavior is that they are displaying. But that doesn't mean that you accept it as being normal or part of what should be approved. And so the empathy side of it saying that I'm paying enough attention to you that I see a change in behavior or a change in lifestyle or change in eating. All of those are what we describe as being signs of mental health issues, right? I can see it. I acknowledge that they're present, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can come around me and display it any kind of way, or I won't check it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Lady Ebony, what I hear you talking about is being authentic with this person. When do you say,
Right.
hey, look, I think you have a problem?
Right, because I don't see that.
And you do. We should.
Guys,
Yeah.
not my dear.
Yes.
Nor do I want you walking through life thinking that way.
Yes.
But we're laughing, but like we know we all have people we're running through our minds.
Yes,
but, like,
everybody has
everyone
somebody
has
that
this in their head, and
If not more than one.
a whole crew of them.
Got a crew.
It might be, listen, truth be told, it might be yourself.
It
That's
has been
it.
times.
To me, mental health starts with yourself.
That was
It starts with yourself.
Recognize where you are
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
I gotta recognize my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we start looking for other
Trying to
people,
help someone.
But
what's
that is
going
very-
on
and
with
that's
you?
But
biblical.
I worked on myself.
Yeah.
I took the time out. I went to therapy. I continued with it until we worked on our goals and I moved from it. So you tend to recognize it when you're not that person that's in it anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, if I'm supposed to be Dr. Phil, just let me know. Because everybody comes around that seems like they need counseling, they need mental health, they need therapists, or they need some type of help or coaching just through life. So like you said, I like what you said. All of us has dealt with mental health at some time or another. It's what do you do the solutions to work
Yeah.
on it to get yourself healthy.
Yep. And another thing I'll add is everyone needs therapy, including the therapist.
Yes.
Yes.
There is no
Yes.
one that's exempt, and this is
Right.
normal. Like, it's okay. And one of the biggest mental health issue is depression and anxiety. And just to educate everyone, anxiety is when we're concerned about the future. What is she going to say? What's going to happen? Am I going to get that job? How? That's anxiety. The depression is the past. I should have done that if I went to school, if I didn't have this kid, if I didn't move. That's depression. But when we focus in the here and now, we're okay. And the here and now looks like, what am I doing right now? Right now, I'm in couch church, right? I am with Lady Ebony, Pastor Bagel, India, Crystal. The temperature feels good. Everything is good.
Not so bad.
Right. Here and now is sitting where you are. So it also, if you think about it, is meditation. Sitting still and taking it all in.
So Dr. J, how do we become aware of how we show up?
Yes. Sometimes it might be hard for us to know how we show up. But my neighbor next to me, it's okay to check in. Like, hey, what you think about when I walked into the room? Like, did I do too much? Was I too introverted? Give me some feedback. But also, it should be someone that you respect and trust. Not your player hater, because the player hater is going to be like, child, you need to sit somewhere.
Right.
No, you want somebody. So that's how we could check in. It's okay.
Yeah, they got all these reality shows about marriage and dating. And it seems like all of them are always on 100, right? They show up into the room and they're ready to fight. They're ready to argue. And I know a lot of that is scripted.
Yes.
And so they're being prodded to behave a certain way.
Yes.
But there's still a reality portion of it that taps into individual personalities. Because you can see how some individuals, they play the part, they go in. Other people, they try, but it don't fit their personality. So they're not as aggressive. And so some of the challenges that I have experienced and even witnessed is how to recognize triggers. And sometimes we think triggers are those things that set us off, and it can be the simplest of things.
Yes, let me talk about triggers. Exact definition you said. Something that elicits a response from us. What triggers can be a scent, a sound, a person, a light, a place. But it takes us back to some place that we've been that was negative, where we had to defend ourselves. And so that in that moment. And that defense can be something we say or don't say, because sometimes we withdraw. It can be a reaction, a statement. And so we do get triggered. But we have to know what our triggers are. Sometimes your trigger could be an in-law, a family member, a place.
Not my mother-in-law. You're not my trigger. If you're watching this, you are not one of my triggers.
Right, exactly.
So let's talk about coping mechanisms.
Coping mechanisms.
I wanna poll the couch, to find out what coping mechanisms do you have in order to maintain a proper mental health. That's the best way to say it.
Yeah, I
Dr.
like
J.
that. Yes.
Yeah. What are your coping mechanisms to maintain a proper mental health?
My number one is prayer. Has to be. Listening to gospel, taking it back during the time during the gospel. Also, when it was like Tamala Man, Yolanda Adams, those old songs. That has to be my first coping mechanism, my healthy one, because I've overcome bad ones. Yeah.
Excellent.
Mine is take a deep breath, and then I normally start holding a conversation with God, like He's sitting right here next to me on the couch, because that's how I feel sometimes. I'll be like, hey, I need you to come here.
Yeah.
Come here, Jesus, for a minute, because you got to help me do this. And when I was younger, I lived right across the street from Fort DuPont Park, so I would actually go over, just remove myself from the hood and go over there to the park, fresh air, going for a walk, just talking with God.
Yes.
I think for me, in addition to like meditating and praying, I had to learn to disconnect. Because I went through a period where I had really bad anxiety, and I didn't know. I didn't know it was anxiety.
Right.
I did not know. I thought, oh, wow, something not right in my body. What in the world is that? But, and it wasn't until I actually went to the doctor. I thought like I was having something issue with my heart. And the woman kept me, I'll never forget this because it was a turning point in my life. I was having like chest pains and just issues, but in my work life, it was just piling up. So when I went in to get checked in, she took me up and took all these different tests. She was like, stress tests and stuff. She was like, you're fine. But while she was texting me, I had like my phone in my hand. I was doing work. And she was like, ma'am. And she said, give me that. She said, you don't need to stay overnight. She said, but I need you to stay in this room and relax because you don't know how to disconnect and relax. And she said, I'm tired of seeing young black women coming in here thinking they about to die, and it's really just stress because you don't know how to disconnect. And this, I believe it was like an angel of God sent. This woman just began to minister to me in that hospital about just being present and letting go of everything and focusing on me. She said, because if you don't, you are going to die. Whether it will be physically, mentally, or spiritually, she said, something is dying because you don't know how to disconnect. She took my phone from me and was like, just relax. And she said, the funny thing is, I don't even think you know how to do that. And I was like, my medical coverage ain't bad for this lady.
Mind your business.
But it took me on a journey to number one, understand and identify. The anxiety didn't look like what I thought it looked like in my head. Like, it wasn't. And also to begin to like say, okay, God, show me how to relax so I create time for myself and understand that to not feel guilty with this self-care, right? And it is really an act of resistance in some ways. Audre Lorde talks about that, right? And so that's what I do. So now I incorporate scriptures or meditative. There's this thing I watch on YouTube all the time, and I just play it, tell everybody to go, and I relax, and I come out like.
Yeah, so that's good because so we understand that there's this intersectionality between mental health and faith. And so whether it's the reading of scriptures or the prayers or the meditation, it's important, I believe, for us as a people to be connected to a divine. That we are three-part people. And part of us is spirit. And so spirit has to connect with the spirit. And I oftentimes say, listen, I'm Christian, but I don't care if you're Christian, if you Islam, if you Buddha, if you Confucius, I don't care if you worship, Jesus or Allah. There is something about the transcendent presence of a divine being that has a way of grounding us, and too often we disconnect from the wrong thing, right? We disconnect from the right thing and stay connected to the wrong things. So we disconnect from God and we replace it with technology, with TV, with telephones. We can do polls and say how many people when they first wake up in the morning, the first thing they do before they pray is grab their phone. You ain't nobody texting you 6 o'clock in the morning and you ain't missing no call, but somehow you feel that you got to be connected to what's going on in the world.
You're always missing out.
Like you're always missing out, and the primary thing that will ground you, keep you, motivate you, propel you is your relationship to the divine, to whatever the God is of your understanding, right? That says, wait a minute. I'm here another day. Before I put my feet on the ground, let me wiggle my toes in a bed, right? The old folks used to worship God and talk about how you woke up clothed in your right mind, and we really don't know what that means today. We don't take the time to process what it means to be clothed in your right mind. Listen, COVID-19 pandemic for the last 3 years, we know in the U.S. alone, it killed, it murdered. That virus murdered
Yeah.
1 million people. We know that, and the number's still growing in this quote unquote post pandemic era. But we also have to take account of the mental health challenges, the 3 years of social isolation created on us as a people. We have to take note of what social distant learning did to young kids,
Yes.
and removing the interaction in classrooms and schools. We got to recognize how COVID-19 exacerbated some mental health issues
In the black community.
in the black community, and how the untreated mental health
Yeah.
turned into mental illness, right? Because you can have acute depression,
Right.
right? You know, seasonal depression. You know when the time clock changes and it's cold outside and ain't no sun shining.
That's right.
You know how your body changed. How you don't feel like doing nothing or going nowhere. Like a bear who hibernates in the wintertime. Right? You understand that.
Got to.
And so you know when the springtime comes, you get this boost of life and energy, the sun hitting you on the top of your head, and now your endorphins are they moving,
right.
and you doing all that stuff, right? Because now you proper mental health. But when it goes untreated, when your mental when you don't develop the right coping skills, then your seasonal depression can turn into clinical depression. And that's what you was talking about, Dr. J. Now you're moving past, so to say, talk therapy, and now you need medication therapy. And in the black community, for multiple reasons, we just don't seek out mental health services the way that we should.
Yeah.
Our coping mechanisms, by and large, has been drugs and alcohol, sex, and all other type of things to relieve pressure in our life. And I just think that it is taking a detrimental toll on our community. And I'm not trying to advocate, but listen to this. We need to organize and shut down some of these liquor stores and 24-hour
Tobacco stores.
tobacco grocery stores.
Vaping is something.
Vape,
that is-
vaping, all of that
Marijuana
targets
usage.
it targets our people. What was you about to say, Crystal?
I wanted to speak on when you said that people wasn't seeking mental health, and it's because of the stigma in the black community. That came from generational curses of our ancestors,
Yes.
thinking that we will be called crazy if we go seek therapeutic services from a psychologist, therapist, and a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
So it's
And-
retraining that generational curse that was passed down from our generations.
Definitely. And then we as a people, we're private. So, we've
Our
been told
culture
and
is
taught,
just-
yeah.
don't tell your business to
Don't.
anybody.
To
That's
nobody.
bad.
That's your secret. That's
Nobody.
the family
Right.
secret.
You keep
Right.
it.
Nobody.
But it's tragic.
What goes on it?
Yeah,
I
no,
was
go ahead.
gonna
You're
say
right.
the person that knows most of our secrets are the bartenders.
Yeah. And I like that you use that word secret, because I say healing begins when we start talking about that secret. Everybody has a secret. And when we start talking, whether it's to a close friend, sometimes even a stranger, what happened in their secret, we begin to heal. But when we just keep that in and nobody knows, we just try to function, that's when we start trying to use whatever
That's
we
so
can
true.
to cope. But when we start talking about that secret, there's help.
I never thought
And
about
then when
that.
we tell somebody and we tell the wrong person or the person that
That
we
gossip.
trusted,
They go
and
gossip.
then they go tell
That's
somebody,
true.
now that becomes a
That
traumatic
hurt.
experience.
There you go.
And
That
then the
is
person
true.
said, I ain't never telling nobody
Nobody
nothing
That
again.
is, and they shut down.
They shut
Right.
down.
Oh, man.
I see that a lot when it comes to molestation type
That's
things,
a-
where the person as a kid told an adult,
And,
and the
And they
adult
just-
didn't believe
they
it. They got in
it.
trouble and they
Yeah.
shut down. And then 50 years later, they're in therapy talking about it for the first time. Again.
I think we should, when you were talking about faith earlier, and we were always talking about what can come out of the church, right? And so within the church, I think we need to begin to normalize counseling, normalize therapy by licensed professionals, because sometimes we have tried to over spiritualize, right?
Oh my God.
And so what happens is and we say this because you walk in church, hey, no, I'm blessed and highly favored. Not to say that people aren't blessed and highly favored, but sometimes we know we have said that, but on the inside, we've been like, I'm hurt. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know whether I should, and this is a big struggle as you will see, whether I should speak what I should be feeling, or can I acknowledge what's really going on within me, and then who do I seek? So we need to begin to marry the word,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And then marry going to a professional to help you unpack and unload. And we don't see that. I think
Yeah, I
we
think
haven't seen it
I
as
think
much.
we don't see it as much as we used to.
And the pastors need.
Right,
yeah,
but we
we've
said,
done some stuff.
but,
We've done
but,
some work.
but we need to reclaim our sacred spaces, because for the black church, we have adopted so many things outside of our culture. We replaced our preaching styles. We replaced our music. We replaced our worship, and so we've lost sight of the fact that for many, Sunday morning was the place for
Yeah,
therapeutic support.
It was, yeah.
So we need to reclaim for the black man. That the church was the only place that he felt esteemed and valued.
Right, right.
Right? And so unchecked, of course, that can turn negatively to control of the church and things like that. But our preaching needs to have therapeutic
Yeah.
measurements in it. Our singing, the song selection.
Yes.
You know, I oftentimes say, listen, I ain't knocking nothing, but don't give me no Hillsong. Because Hillsong always sings about this degree of prosperity. And Hillsong was created based upon the culture music of that day. So it took their style, it took all of that and just put God to it.
It doesn't
Give me-
address our.
Give me some spirituals.
What's a hill
Hill-
song? I mean,
you don't know hill song?
You gotta give me an example of a hill song.
Go ahead, lady.
Come on, what's the example?
Why I
of a hill-
gotta be.
Please.
And then I do
I'm
want to
begging
talk
you.
about
What's
what
the-
we are
what's
doing.
the hill song?
Okay,
Church.
absolutely.
Yes.
But it's
The
more
Hillsong.
so Hillsong music, and Hillsong is actually a it's type of music. It's more, you'll hear more like it's almost like Maverick City-ish. You know Maverick City that
Yeah.
okay, but it's a little more like
More upbeat than that.
no. a
Y'all
little
can't
more-
sing. Y'all got songs.
It's,
I don't know how- I don't know how
it would be
to song.
described as a Christian music versus gospel. So Hillsong,
Oh, okay.
right?
Right.
It'd be more
Okay.
Christian music, and that's really how they separate it because there's a big issue behind that. Christian music versus gospel music. So the sound is Hillsong more white singers, more like
Here we go.
a little
Here we go.
pop. You ain't gonna hear no celestial type. You know, more popish.
But
I like
here's the thing.
I
It speaks.
like it.
You know, for
But it's
for
speaking
me.
to a group of people
For
because
me,
Hillsong
it
brought
speaks a
people
lot
out
of.
that
It
do not
speaks
play that song for me. In
but
church,
it
I'm trying
speaks
to build
more
Holy
to
Spirit.
for
But we-
me prosperity
I like-
and blessings
You
and
think so?
God do this for me and God move me in that direction, and it does not take into account, and that's the challenge for us as the black church and black community. It does not address our struggles. And not to say we ought to focus on them, but neither does it address how we overcome them.
Have done is we've opened mental health clinics within black churches with the licensed professionals and the
Right.
folks you're talking to, and it was a partnership, a marriage, and I call it clinical and clergy
Yes.
coming together, and we've seen it done wonders in churches that we have open. The first one was the Hope Center of Carmody Hills, and Hope stands for Holistic Opportunities Propelling Everyone. So you don't have to be a Christian, because of course we're in the community. So people in the community, when they're hurting, they'll come to the closest place of worship
Yeah.
just to cry, let it out, and us, black people, people of color. And then so there's healing on both ends going on with the faith and therapy, counseling. We've incorporated similar to this, where we're in church on a Sunday, and we're talking about mental health and faith and spirituality, and that's the premise of the book, where we're merging the two, because that's the first place we go for healing, and our spirituality is a type of healing.
Yeah.
Shannon Hodges, which is a clinical mental health counselor, he talked about the 7 dimensions of self-care. So when we talk about self-care, people usually think about exercising,
pedicures,
yeah, all of that.
mini
But
bags.
it's also physical, cognitive, spiritual, and that's where that comes in.
I think that what also needs to be addressed, and sometimes I feel like sometimes we down our people, but there have not been a lot of access and resources in Black communities all the time when it comes just healthcare, and you can take the whole umbrella
Healthcare
of
system.
healthcare system and
yes.
look at how it's applied in the Black community. So if basic healthcare people are having a problem with,
Yep.
when you get down to like, oh, therapists and counseling sessions, first of all, your insurance half time ain't gonna
Yep.
cover any of it. So now you're talking about a group of people who may be living in a depressed community having to, then you tell me I gotta pay to sit
Yeah.
across from somebody
And
else.
that's why it's so important, because we understand that in the whole clinical and counseling profession, that is, less than 10% combined of African American men and women, and that's why it's so important that our
Yeah.
pastors and our
Yes.
ministers
Our
and our lay
teachers,
leaders
our-
and
yeah.
our teachers
Yes.
in schools begin to
to partner with.
incorporate this into
Teachers,
their
yeah.
into their own education, right? Teachers,
Sunday morning?
teachers
on a weekday.
when they go to school should have classes regarding mental health,
okay.
a part of their certification.
Okay.
Clergy who go to seminary schools, part of that should be mental health classes.
If that's not a part of, or is that like
It's
an
not
elective?
Well, it's some schools may have some clinical tracks around chaplaincy and things like that. But
it's not a part of the main course.
it's not a part of the main curriculum, whether it's for clergy or whether it's for educators, right? And I think that we just need to, even for those who graduated from schools, we need to begin, as you talked about, create those spaces within our congregations. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to go back and get a degree, but you ought to have some type of training,
And care.
right? So you know
care
how
for
to,
people. That
right?
makes
You know
sense.
how to
That's what I
care
was
for
like,
people.
how do you
Just think about how many lives and children would have been saved if we already had this growing up, or if we implement it now within our education system.
Yes.
They will have someone to turn to. I don't remember not one incident, one time where I had that freedom to feel comfortable to go to an educator or to go somewhere in the school system and say, hey, I'm hungry. Hey, I'm depressed. Hey, I'm struggling. Because what was the outlet?
Yeah. And it's part of holistic care, right? We're caring for the whole person. So I'm thinking about kids, as you're talking about being hungry, and we're talking about just being in the school system, teachers, educators, principals. So the kid that comes to school that's angry and running out the building or yelling, we want to reprimand them. But really, what's going on at home? And even before that, did you eat today?
Yes.
And a space
Yeah.
come, let's do it. And I
Antecedent.
do see in schools, they'll do that, but we just need kind of more of that and realize that those behaviors is coming
Come
from somewhere else.
Somewhere else.
The
Yeah.
anger,
Dr.
the
J,
rage.
How do
rage.
we begin to be our own advocates or advocate for others, because we've gone from churches to now school systems, even in the workforce. I think it would be so great if companies would actually somehow incorporate this.
We have it at our company. We do have it, social and emotional wellness. We have a wellness room.
Excellent. That's what I'm referring to.
For 35 minutes.
Yep.
Really?
And sit down.
And just relax. And it has dim lights, calming music is playing.
Exactly.
So
can you bring a guest in?
No.
Imagine having that in the school system.
How do we advocate?
Or place of employment, or what else you said? You was talking about us advocating.
Whether it's school, whether it's in your professional areas or church, but because I've seen models of some schools, I've just seen a few that have tried to do that with kids. I was reading about a program where they were actually teaching kids about yoga.
Yes.
And they were dimming the lights in the kids, and this was in a low-income area, and they were noticing a difference in the emotional intelligence of their young black students who didn't have a place to unload. And it brought tears to my eyes in watching it, because on top of all this other stuff, we talk about the black community, there's also a history of trauma because of what our people have gone through. And during COVID, don't forget, we had the George Floyd incident. And we're sitting watching, and we can't really move like we want, but we're then police brutality. And we're dealing with all these issues on top of everything else. And I'm always like, how can we teach people to advocate for themselves, or how can we advocate for others?
Yeah. So number one, you talked about experiencing certain emotions and not having the words for it. It reminded me of a session I had with a young man, and he couldn't really explain. So I told him, draw it out, color it. Gave him coloring books, colored things to draw. And what he drew, I'm like, this looks like you had a panic attack. And he's like, well, what is a panic? And I described, that's what it was. We don't have the words to say, hey, I'm feeling sad. So we have to train and teach all of that. To the people, to us, again, personally, doesn't matter the age range. How do we talk this through? And then what kind of help services? As you were talking, it reminded me of, in every curriculum, whatever we study, there's a self-care course that identifies that, and that's from kindergarten, pre-K up. That'll help. So we can advocate for stuff like that, spaces where we can just step aside and be silent.
What about for parents who are in the home with their kids and dealing with teenagers? What are some steps that they can go through in helping their children understand and be aware of themselves?
Well, first is that they got to deal with their stuff. First. Parents, we like to say, because I'm a parent, we like to say, well, you need to do this, and you're not doing this. But what is it that is going on with me that I've instilled or not? So they're doing it, but yet still I want to be a good parent and say, you need to do this. Like the parent who's smoking, don't smoke is bad for you, but they're smoking.
So it's like, do as I say.
Even the parents, it starts with them.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yes. And also with them saying, I need support. I need help. And the help has to come from outside of me. You ever try to tutor your own kid or your own family member? Oh no, you gotta get somebody else.
Me. I am not a teacher.
You gotta get somebody else. You don't have
to Alexa. I was like, Alexa, what's this answer?
We need help. So the parents gotta ask for help.
So this has been a good conversation. I think we can end with it in terms of the intersectionality between mental health and faith, that there are so many different programs and services that we can put into practice in the church. Whether it's a mental health clinic, whether it's through our therapeutic preaching or singing or worship or creating a Bible study, around a certain topic issue. Or, I'll tell you right now, what's playing in my mind is, back in the day we had the sanctuary, then we had chapels. And people would go to the chapels for prayer, right? And so what was playing in my mind is, how can we take an underutilized space, a classroom, in our churches and turn it into a meditation room? And so, with the blackout curtains, or with the steam or the rocks or the yoga mats or whatever, just as a way for people to recenter. Or everybody can just order Cobology. Every place the books are sold, check it out on Amazon. You can get the book there. Let me see. What's my chapter in
Yours is
here?
probably chapter 2.
You know, here it is.
Yep.
It starts on page 23.
That's it.
Legacy of Trauma, Healing a Black Man's Pain.
You want me to paragraph from it?
You want me to
Yes,
read the paragraph?
please
Let's see
From
what
it.
past the road.
Scriptures reveal a God who hears the cries of the oppressed and loves to bring deliverance. The mission of God has set the agenda for the Black church in preaching, prayer, worship, and a need to recover an integrated vision of the gospel as a message of liberation from every kind of oppression. I have sought the Black church on many occasions to pray for the spiritual and mental clarity. So I desperately desire, as an African American man, to search and to find a reprieve from the issues of this present day.
Yeah.
Let me talk. So, other things he spoke about in this section was how hard it is to be a Black man in America. And one of the things I remember that stood out, what you wrote, was that, so how to help a Black man? Leave him alone. Leave me alone. Let me worship how
Let
I
me
do.
stay.
Let me be with my family.
Right.
Let me drive
me
down the
alone.
street, right? You remember
Yeah.
that? Okay. That's key to that.
Just let me be.
Let me be.
That's a
Just-
whole nother 30
Just
minutes.
let me be.
It is.
All right, well,
Next
we go wrap this up.
Leave them alone.
We
Leave me alone.
gonna do that, but we gonna have some more men on the couch talk about Black men health issues and let me be. Leave
Even
me,
Michael Jackson
leave me
said,
alone.
"Leave me
Y'all
alone."
didn't want me.
There you go.
Y'all didn't want me to talk about y'all gossip. Y'all not gonna talk about. Y'all not gonna talk about.
the gossip.
I'm just saying, y'all didn't want me to talk about women and gossip. Y'all not gonna sit here and talk about men want to be left alone.
Leave me alone.
Listen, Dr. J, we want to say thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us today. Let's give Dr. J a hand. We want to invite you to come back next week. As we really begin to talk about some of the stigmas that are around mental health for the Black community. Are you available?
I'm available.
All right. Again, we want to say thank you to Dr. Joanne Frederick, Dr. J. You can reach her at askdrj@yahoo.com.
That's Dr. Joanne.
Ask Dr. Joanne at yahoo.com. You can go to Amazon and pick up the book Copeology, Exploring Coping Techniques with Dr. Joanne Jefferson and friends. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to visit us on all of our social media platforms at Couch Church DMV. Again, I'm Orlando Jermaine Bago. Thank you for worshiping with us on today. We hope we expose some things by taking the plastic off of the living room furniture. Until next time, may God bless you, may the Lord keep you, and may heaven continue to smile upon you. Peace.